Alright, so this is the first time I've ever done a vlog, but wanted to share my experience with Ivan's ECU Flash and share why I decided to go with Ivan's as opposed to somebody else. Big things Yamaha did wrong with the FJ09, and also comment on the FZ09, MT10, and really all of their fly-by-wire throttle systems. They have a very snatchy on-off throttle transition, in addition to other things that most Japanese manufacturers do, like 1 through 3 gear throttle restrictions. So underneath a certain RPM, typically 8,000 RPMs, even if you whack the throttle all the way wide open, the ECU actually limits the amount of throttle that's applied to about 50%. It's kind of like a safety feature that they have, and it makes sense, but at the same time limits your own safety in a way that if you need the power, it's not there in first through third gear. So most major flashers are going to be Vcyclenut for about 200 bucks. You got Nels over at Wheel Dyno Works for about $290 to $310, and then you have Ivan's for about $350. I've heard and read great things about all three of them. Don't think you can go wrong with any of them. But myself, I am a sport touring rider. I like to emphasize the sport. I like to have a comfortable bike, but I like to be able to carve up the twisties when I need to. And so for me, my biggest thing is the throttle transition and the on-off throttle transition being very jerky. I'm also an intermediate track day level rider, and so I know what a proper throttle should feel like, and I know what having a smooth throttle hand is, and I consider myself to have quite a smooth throttle hand, especially on that last little 1/8 little bit of throttle turn. That's that on-off transition. But even then, on this bike when I got it, not to mention the problems with the stock suspension, but you know, if you want to go into a corner and you're coming in too hot, or you want to trail brake, you roll off the throttle, you apply the brake, and if you're at all leaned over and you get back on the throttle, I mean, it just sends a massive whack of just chassis upsetness all the way through, front and back. And if you're on stock suspension, it's going to be even more obvious. That was my biggest concern, and overall just the amount of smoothness. And so I was on Google for hours and hours researching, and somebody had switched from Vcyclenuts to Ivan's because he was searching for that smoothness of throttle and said it was a big difference. So yes, Vcyclenut for 200 bucks, it's really honestly the best bang for your buck if all you're looking for is power, getting rid of a 1 through 3 gear restriction, lowering the coolant temp fans down from 220 down to 205 or 200 or 195, whichever one Vcyclenut does. You can't go wrong with it, right? He's going to load up a fuel map if you want it, no issues. Me, I want the smoothness, so I was looking at Wheel Dyno Works. Now they have the most extensive dyno testing of any of the manufacturers, so he claims, but seems pretty true, no reason not to believe it. And I emailed Nels at Wheel Dyno Works, had great customer service, emailed me back, answered my questions, and big bonus for them is if you change your setup at all, you can send your ECU back in and they'll reflash it for free. I personally have a stock exhaust on right now. I kind of like the quietness of it, but in the future I might change it. So I was like, wow, I really want to go with Nels at Wheel Dyno Works because don't have to pay for it again. But again, like I said, I was doing some searching, hours and hours, and people are still having problems with the smoothness on the on-off throttle transition from Wheel Dyno Works. And then there's threads where he's recommended going in and changing the actuator position sensor, APS, which basically slows the quickness of the throttle opening and closing, which of course helps with the on-off throttle transition. But that's not so much the problem as it is that Yamaha has a fuel cut associated with on-off throttle, and that is what causes the twitchiness most of the time. So decided to give Ivan a call. I've been a long-time supporter of Ivan. I was an FZ1 guy for years. I know Ivan's work. He's the most expensive, but he also does the most. If you look online, you go to Vcyclenut's page. Pretty simple looking, if I'm being honest. Kind of clunky, but hey, 200 bucks, you're getting massive bang for your buck. I get that. You know, you go over to Wheel Dyno Works, again, they're going to say the same thing. They're going to load a fuel map. They're going to do 1 through 3 throttle restriction removal. They're going to get rid of the 115 mile per hour speed limit, and they're going to help everything else. But again, it's a very simple, short explanation. Not too much going on there. 300 bucks, give us your money, we'll do it for you. Can't go wrong with it. Go to Ivan's site. He's got ECU tuning philosophy. He's got bullets and bullets and bullets of information that's being done, in addition to the standard lowering the coolant temp fans, getting rid of the top speed limiter, getting rid of the 1 through 3 throttle restrictions. He also adjusts ignition timing for 91 fuel, which of course would just be like typically be a fuel map, right? But he also adjusts vacuum tables. He also raises the rev limiter by 300 RPM, so you have more power. And there's a whole host of other things that he details on his page that maybe the other ECU flashers are doing, but it's not listed on their page. And if it's not listed, who knows if they're doing it. But I called Ivan up. I said, hey Ivan, I'm kind of concerned because I have a stock exhaust, but I might want to change it in the future. Will I have to send it back? And if I do send it back to you, are you going to charge me? Ivan says, no, you don't have to reflash it if you get an aftermarket exhaust after I give you my flash. Which is in direct contrast to Wheel Dyno Works. And they said, I asked them, I said, hey, when you do it, can you just put the fuel map on for the aftermarket exhaust and I'll get to it within like 1,000 miles? And Wheel Dyno Works said no, because that will foul your plugs and foul the catalytic converter prematurely. So Ivan had told me that, and I was kind of skeptical, so I got back online and I was reading, and lo and behold, Vcyclenut had commented on a thread about sending in an ECU after adding a aftermarket flash after already flashing it with the stock exhaust on. And just like Ivan said, and Vcycle agreed, that the stock maps and the fuel maps for aftermarket exhaust hardly has any difference between them. So, with that being said, that kind of solidified in my mind why I should go with Ivan's. It's $50 more, but I'm getting a guy who's been doing this forever. And everybody who's ever gotten an Ivan's tune, you can't find one of them that's upset with it except for the price. And he's just a lot more detailed in what he says that he does to the ECU, and his philosophy is not max power, it's not max this or that, it's just improving the overall drivability. He's not going to do something to the bike that's going to limit it in one way and sacrifice it for, you know, more power or anything like that. It's the overall maximum rideability of the bike is his ECU tuning philosophy. So I got the bike back. Was able to ride it in twisties today for about 40 miles. Even on my ride home, the difference was 100% noticeable. I have a Triumph Street Triple 675. I know what a triple should feel like. I know what very smooth fueling should feel like. I am so confident on the other bike going into a corner, braking, trail braking all the way down to the apex, and then rolling on that throttle and knowing I'm not going to have a hiccup through the chassis or anything like that. And I know what a nicely tuned triple should feel like as well. So riding home and on-off throttle transition, immediately noticeable. Rolling off, you still get that kind of chunk forward, because obviously you're not applying power to the rear wheel, you're not squatting the rear wheel. But then coming back on is the big notice. And again, like I said, it's that last 1/8 of throttle that's the big difference. But with Ivan's, he disables the fuel cut, which is what causes that massive changeover from on-off throttle transition. And so there's still a small amount of fuel being applied even when you roll off the throttle, which makes when you roll onto the throttle very smooth. Unless you just grab a handful of it, it's not twitchy at all. And if you're actually concentrating on it and trying to have a smooth wrist, you cannot feel a transition at all anymore. It's very, very smooth. This is a powerful motor. I came off the SZ1, which had about 140 horsepower. This thing is every bit as grunty and torquey as that FZ1 was, minus just the top end rush. And so you get on it from an off throttle all the way on. You can feel it squat the rear and kick you forward, but it's no longer twitchy, it's no longer snatchy, it doesn't upset the chassis, especially if you're concentrating on it. I tried it multiple times today, trail braking all the way down into the curve as much as I wanted to, and then rolling on the throttle as smooth as I could, and it was a big improvement over stock, which again, I have a very smooth throttle hand, especially in the corners, and as much as I would try, I did not really feel comfortable getting off the brakes mid-corner and then rolling on the throttle. So I would just brake before the corner, have my throttle already applied as I enter the corner, and that way I wouldn't have to mess with the on-off throttle transition. I didn't think it was as horrible as a lot of people had said in stock form, but coming from an experienced rider myself and someone who really, really likes that smoothness in the corner, I knew it needed to be changed. So that's my first big notice I've noticed. The second thing, 1 through 3, under 7,000 RPMs, I felt like it was kind of laggy, especially around 3 to 4,000 RPMs. Even it'd be kind of lurchy. If you let off the throttle, it would kind of surge a little bit and mess around. That's no longer here. 1 through 3rd gear, under 7,000 RPMs. The pull on it is insane. It is drastically noticeable. I have not tried to turn off traction control and see if it wheelies any easier or faster or better, because I'm not a wheelie guy. Don't really care to, but I may do that for an experiment. But definitely just transform the power delivery, especially down low. Like I said, I really noticed between like 2,500 and 4,000 RPMs, especially as you got closer to like 2,500 RPMs, it would kind of lurch and chug, and it really didn't like lugging down low. Doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. Let's see, 6th gear, 3,000 RPMs, 40 miles per hour, just cruising. And there's no real lugging or anything like that. Right now we're at 2,700 RPMs, 28. I'm going down 2,000 RPMs in the 6th gear. It's not lugging, it's not doing any of the old habits it used to have. Also, I've noticed on the highway, typically was running about 188, 190, and it's a little bit high right now, but just cruising on the highway, it was reading about 175, 176. And here in Texas, it's 104 degrees right now on my odometer, tachometer reading, so doing pretty good. Something about the ignition timing and the fuel mapping is definitely making the engine run more efficient and smoother, which is part of his tuning philosophy as well. Again, is there a big power increase? I'd probably say 3, 4, 5 horsepower. Still have stock airbox, still have stock filter, still have stock exhaust, but I think the mid-range has really increased a lot due to the fuel mapping and the ignition mapping and the throttle restrictions removed. Let's just boogie on it, 3rd gear. And then I feel like it also has a little bit more top end as well. And it already had a screaming top end to begin with, in my opinion. Very strong pull through the entire rev range, but I think it's more pronounced. I think the Flash definitely gave it more of a mid to low grunt that it needed. And I know on my street triple there's no real punch to it. It's just smooth and linear all the way through, and that's something the Yamaha motor definitely has. It's a little bit more fun on the top end, a little bit rowdier for sure. It's got extra cc's and power, but it's definitely a more fun, rowdy motor as opposed to a more refined and smooth 675. Vibrations are a little bit less at 70 miles per hour, not a lot. I have really sensitive hands. I don't grip too tight or anything like that. It's just I have a problem with vibrations putting my hands to sleep. Luckily the FJ09 and the 847cc triple seems to have a very coarse vibration doesn't put my hand to sleep, like a fine buzz of an inline 4 or my Street Triple R. People are great at driving here in North Dallas. But just a little. I mean, it's still got vibrations. The stock exhaust system, I've been told, is a main culprit in vibrations through the bars. And I do have heavy bar ends, so done as much as I can really besides that. But a little bit less vibration at 70, 75 miles per hour, which is around that 4.5, 5 grand RPM mark. Besides that, really can't say much. Engine's running cooler, engine has more power, fueling's a lot smoother. I mean, what else do you want? And if you're already gonna be spending $300 at Wheel Dyno Works, $50 extra to get it done by someone, I think Wheel Dyno Works is great. I think they really know what they're doing over there. I don't think you're gonna be unhappy if you go there. But for me, I've known Ivan for years. I've known so many people who have used his ECU Flash, and as much digging as I did about the smoothness, who has the smoothest throttle transition of any of the flashers, I kept coming up with Ivan's. And for me, an extra $50 for something I'm going to do one time, it just made sense. And you're not going to find anybody who got Ivan's Flash who decided they want to get it flashed and go back to somebody else. It's just, you won't find it. He charges more, but he's been doing it since he's been doing it with carburetors. He's been doing it with jet kits back in the early 2000s. And then the second ECUs came out, he started cracking into them and doing this, and it shows. Just the level of refinement and the amount that he goes into on his page about what he's doing, why he's doing it, etc., etc. That's why I chose Ivan's Flash, and don't regret it. I do not regret it. The only knock I have is the price, but it does everything that he advertised. This thing is going to be super fun out in North Georgia, Deals Gap, Colorado, Northwest Arkansas, all the places I like to go and ride and tour to, and then ride the twisties. So that is all I have. If you have any questions, I guess you can comment them and I will try to answer them.